Hello there, it's Graciela here. In today's video, we'll be learning how to log into a website and answer dynamic security questions with Power Automate Desktop. So what happens with this website is that we log in with a user and a password, which is regular for a website, but then we get some security questions. We have set up 3 different security questions for this website, but we get only 2 of them. And we need to see what's the question that we get, read the question, and then just answer it based on it. And these 2 questions that we're gonna get will be different every time we log into this website. And we're gonna be learning how to perform all this process with Power Automate Desktop. Let's get started by opening our Power Automate Desktop app and let's hit on New. We're gonna go here with a new flow and just assign a name to our flow. And we're gonna start with the recorder. Since we are working with a web page, we are going to be using Firefox, but all of the logic we're gonna work with works with either Firefox or Chrome or Edge. So for this case, let's just take note of the login website. And then let's start the recorder. And we're gonna get this pop-up, and here we're gonna click on the 3 dots and we're gonna do launch new web browser, and then let's go to Firefox. Then let's set up the login link, which is here. And I'm also going to set it here because you can see that Power Automate by default added this action to start a new browser and navigate to this link. But this link for now is blank, so let's just set it up. Then let's click on record and Power Automate will start recording. Something really important is that for us to be able to work with web browsers, we need to install the specific extension for that web browser. For example, I had to install a Firefox extension, and those extensions are available here in Power Automate from the Tools section. So you can get it from there, just install it and make sure it's correctly installed in the web browser to make sure it works. To make sure it works, the only thing that you need to do is to see the kind of icon that pops up when you are hovering over different sections of your web page. You can see here that it says button and it has like a web icon. If I hover over my tab, you can see that the icon changes to an actual window. If you are hovering over a web browser and you don't see the web icon, that means that your extension is not correctly set up, so we need to uninstall it and then install it back. Once you're sure your extension is correct and that the web icon is showing, we can continue. So first, let's insert the email address. You can see Power Automate automatically adds everything into the recorder. It also adds quite a few things that we don't need, so we can just remove them. So in this case, we just add the email, and then we are going to add the password. Sometimes it can get a little bit crazy. We just need to be a little bit patient to make sure that Power Automate recognize all the steps. So now the password has been inserted. Let's wait for the step to show up here in the recorder. Now we have here the password, we have here the email address. Let's delete the few clicks it added on the middle and that it added at the end. Okay. And now let's click on login. Well, it seems like Power Automate is a little bit crazy, so let's stop the recorder and start it again. Before doing anything else, let's remove all the additional steps and let's record again. Here's the pop-up. Now we can start recording. Okay, let's do login. Now it's working correctly. It's telling us wait for action. So that means that it's recording properly. This action should show in a moment here, just as we see it did. Then for this specific website, we need to click on this use another authentication method. And this will take us to a new screen. Now, it seems like it was correctly recognized. And let's remove this go to web page, because really the only thing we need to do is to press login and then another authentication method. So let's remove those. And then here we are going to answer security questions. So let's, okay, it's here. Let's click on it, wait for a moment. Now it recognized correctly the security questions. And here we are getting the two questions. So the first question is, which is your favorite place to visit as a child? So that one for us is museum. So let's write on it. And then the fictional character on this one, that's Potter. Let's give it a minute for Power Automate to recognize what we're doing. Okay, now it's there. Let's do the other one. Okay, so now it recognized that we typed in for the second one. And let's finish it for now. And then we're going to click on confirm in a minute. So let's remove all these comments. And let's remove anything that we don't need. It seems like for now, everything that's recorded is everything that we need. Let's go back to record. And remember that these questions are dynamic. We're not always going to get these two. So we need to read whatever the website is showing. So, but we're not going to do it through the recorder because it's acting weird. We're going to do it in a different way. So for now, let's just close the browser and let's try to start it again to see if it's able to log in and go to the security questions section. Something that I like adding is to make sure that some of the elements are in the web page before trying to click on them, to make sure that the page loads, because sometimes the page loads but the elements haven't loaded. So something that I use a lot for these cases to avoid errors just because there was a second in which the element didn't load. Something that I do is to wait for web page content. So in this case, when we click on login, we want to wait for the use another authentication method element to show. So let's look for that. Use authentication method. And here I'm going to enable this fail with timeout error if this doesn't show up in 15 seconds. And we're going to do the same thing for the security questions part. We are going to select security questions, so we make sure that it's present before we attempt to click on it. And we're also going to do the same thing to fail without error. So let's hit on save. Now let's execute and see how it goes. I don't think it's going to be able to answer the security questions, but at least we're going to get to the screen that we care about. Okay, the login part and actually getting to the security questions is working perfectly. If we go back to our Power Automate workflow, most likely, well, here it's attempting to grade on the first box, but it didn't find it. So we need to be able to read it and to grade on this text box correctly. If we look at the error, we're going to see that this input doesn't exist. It's not found. It is because, as you can see, Power Automate is trying to recognize the first text box for the questions by ID. For us to be able to see how the web page is built and the structure of it, we can always right-click on an element and then click on Inspect. So in this case, we can see how the HTML element or how the HTML tag is built and which attributes we can use to recognize the elements. So we can see that Power Automate is trying to recognize it through the ID, but this ID that was present when we were recording the actions is no longer here. Now we have a completely different ID, as you can see here as well. So we need to find a different element for us to be able to recognize it, because this ID is going to be different this time and it's going to be different the following times that we're working with this web page. So the way that Power Automate is recognizing these text boxes is not working correctly. So for us to fix that, Let's double click on the element, and this is the first question, and let's click on this edit. If we go to the end, we see that this is an input and it's trying to recognize by the ID. That's not going to work. But we can see we have this attribute that is called data automation ID, and it's called auth first answer / input. And it seems like that's a standard way in which this text box is going to show. So we can rely on this to have Power Automate recognize the first text box for this specific web page. So let's copy this, and in this editor, let's open the text editor and just remove ID, which we know it's going to be dynamic, and replace it by the data automation ID. We're doing this because Power Automate behind the scenes, to be able to recognize with elements, uses jQuery selectors. And jQuery selectors can really use any attribute from the HTML to try to recognize elements. So as soon as we make sure that this is unique across the web page, it's going to work perfectly. So let's hit on save. And now let's do the same thing for the second question, because you can see that Power Automate as well tried to recognize the second question using the ID, which we know is not going to work. The second text box also has a similar attribute called data automation ID, and we are just going to copy this whole text and just put it in the text editor and remove this. And now we can click on save. Now we need to make this dynamic in a way that we are able to recognize which question we're getting, because you can see here that now the first question is, which is my dream job. So now this question, whatever I typed in the first time, which was museum, I think, will not work. So we need to answer the security question based on the text there. And the other one, what's your favorite place to visit? And that one, as we remember, it was showing first the two previous times. Now it's showing second. For us to be able to read data from a web page, there's an action for that in Power Automate. If we expand the browser automation section and we expand the web data extraction, and once we use the control key in our keyboard plus the left click, it now recognizes what we selected, and you can see that now this is not grayed out, and it's linked to the label that is called what is your dream job. So let's hit on save, and then we can see that the attribute name is set up to recognize the own text of the element. So that's gonna give us back the text that we care about. This is not going to fully work. We're gonna see how we can change it in a moment, but we're gonna do the same thing for the other one. Let's drop the get details of element action. Then let's open the UI element, add UI element, and let's go back here to the label. We're gonna use the control key plus left click. And once we record the second label, it's correctly recognized here. And we can see it's always using the text of the label, just like it happened for the first one. For now, let's hit on save. We're gonna fix that in a moment. And then in the attribute name, we just leave own text. For the variable name, we're gonna call it Q2 for question 2. And we're also going to rename the first one that we did to Q1, which is question 1. Now we have realized that the way that Power Automate is recognizing these questions is not going to work because it's relying on the text of the label, and that's not going to work because the label will simply have a different text every time. We're not always going to get this order, and we might get a different question. So let's click on inspect, and here we can see for this specific website, we have this other attribute that is called data automation ID of first answer label. So we can totally use that one instead of going for the label like Power Automate is doing. So in this case, I always go to the text editor because it lets me edit better. So let's here, instead of text, do the data automation ID that we know that it's always going to be there, and then let's hit on save. Then let's do the same thing for the second question, which I assume will be pretty similar. We're gonna find a data automation ID attribute. Okay, so it's here. And let's copy this and let's open the text editor and just replace the text that we know it's going to be different every time for this one here. Let's hit on save and then save. For now, let's go to this section that is called UI Elements, and I'm going to rename this label. Let's click on the three dots and then on Edit. The three dots and then rename, and then let's call it question 1, and then this one question 2. And for this one, we're gonna call it answer 1, and same for the other one. Okay, now it should be able to recognize the questions, but now we need to be able to answer them dynamically. If I close this and then I execute, we're gonna see that it will be able to recognize everything. It will write museum, it will write the second answer, but most likely it won't be answering correctly unless the questions show up in the same order. But this time we should not get any error, just still not answering correctly the questions. Okay, so we see that it wrote in the first text input, which it didn't do in the previous one. Now, most likely, it's getting the second question and it's writing what we indicated. So if we go to our flow, there are no errors. There's just error in what the Power Automate work wrote in the text fields because, of course, we still haven't made them dynamic. But if I see the variables, now we can see on Q1, it is correctly recognizing who is the favorite fictional character as the question 1, just like it's shown here. And on question 2, it's showing what is your favorite place as a child, as well showing correctly. So now we just need to find a way to make this dynamic. And there are really many different ways in which we could be doing this. We could be working with a switch statement, we could be working with an if statement, but we're gonna make it a little bit more dynamic in a way that is easier to make changes in the future, just in case this changes. So these are the 3 questions that we can get. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just write the questions between some double quotes and then separate them by a semicolon. I'm going to do this just to be able to convert this into questions like flat text, and we're going to convert it to kind of a JSON object to be able to identify what's the question and what's the answer. So let's separate it by a comma. And then let's finish with a curly bracket at the beginning and 1 at the end. So now we have the questions on the left and the answers on the right. I'm going to copy this and then I am going to set a variable just at the beginning. So we're going to paste it there and we're going to call it security questions. Then we are going to convert this flat text into a JSON. And we have an actual action for that, which is called convert a JSON string to a custom object. So let's do that. We're gonna select the result from the security questions and we're gonna convert it into a JSON. And here we're gonna call it questions JSON. And then let's hit on save. Now we have converted this text into an actual object that we can check. And something that we can do in Power Automate is we can call or we can bring the values depending on the column name. For example, I'm going to just add a test variable here. I'm going to add it below. And I can call, for example, the object that is called questions JSON. And then just write in between square brackets what's the value that I want to bring. In this case, for example, this question, what's your dream job? And let's quickly execute this. And we're gonna see that when we do this, this variable is now going to have the value of the answer for this question. You can see that this one is called new var, and new var is now set to Power Platform. If I do the same thing and I just change the question, it's just going to bring the answer to that question that I just added here. So if we run it again, now the answer new var should be set to museum, just like we see it has done here. So what we can do is to retrieve the information from the questions JSON object and just pass the question text into the JSON object to extract the response, just like we did here. So what we're gonna do, instead of manually writing the question that we want to get, is just passing the result of Q1 and Q2. So Power Automate will extract the question and just answer it based on whatever text it found on Q1 and Q2. So for that, what we need to do is we just need to go here. Instead of museum, we're gonna bring the questions JSON. We're going to open the square brackets because that's the thing that we need to use to be able to recognize the different columns. And then we're going to say, instead of writing the question that we care about, just bring the result from Q1 and pass it to the object to retrieve the answer. In this case, we need to remove the percentage sign because it only needs to be in the first one like it is here. So once we do that, we're going to extract the results from question 1 and pass it here to retrieve the answer. So let's do the same thing for question 2. So now here, instead of 1, let's do 2. And then hit on save. So now we're going to test it. And finally, we will just need to execute this and add the step to finally log in. Let's execute and make sure everything works. Okay, now we see that it's correctly recognizing the first question and the second question as well with the corresponding response. And now we just need to click on confirm. So now let's go to the recorder and just record the action for the confirmation. Let's do record and let's record the confirm action. Now it seems like it will let us in. And now we are in the specific website that we care about. So let's click on done. And it was added at the beginning of the code. So let's add it just at the end here. Let's remove this. And we're going to remove this new var because this was just a test. And something that we are missing to add is to wait for question 1 or question 2 to be visible because we're still not waiting for that. Even though it's pretty quick, I like to always add it just to make sure. So we're going to wait here for at least question 1. So we can select question 1. And again, let's make sure to always set the failed with timeout error because if we don't set this up, what's going to happen is that if the web page doesn't load or the web page is down or something happens, it's going to stay waiting for even hours. So we always need to make sure that when we're waiting for any content in either in a web page or in a general screen, we always need to set up a timeout time because we need to make sure that at some point, if something happens, we're able to control for how long the bot is going to wait for the action. And then if not, just fail or do whatever or send a notification, but it's really important to add it. So now let's log out and let's try again and see if we are able to make it through the confirmation. Okay, it seems like it properly worked. It recognized correctly the security questions and the different orders in which we can get it. And then it's getting the answer from the JSON object that we defined in our automation. And now it logins properly to the website. It's really important to mention that this is just a way to solve the security questions challenge. And we can use either a key vault or a settings file in our computer that is protected to not expose the questions like we're doing here, but we can just read the text content and then use the very same approach that we have here in case we don't want to use a variable inside the flow that we're working with. And if in any case the questions change, we would just need to change it here in the action number 2, or well, action number 1, because I just removed a comment. We would just need to update it here and that will automatically cascade into the following steps because here we are not hard coding any question text. We are just using the results from the set variable and whatever the robot is reading from the web page. And I hope that this was useful for you. See you next time.